A single Iowa-class broadside sent over 24,000 pounds of armor-piercing steel across 23 miles of ocean. The ships carried 9 16-inch guns, each shell weighing more than a compact car. USS Missouri proved that devastating power still worked when she opened fire in the Persian Gulf in 1991. Yet within years, every one of these warships was gone. Not because the guns stopped being lethal, but because of what it truly cost to wield them. In 1943, the United States Navy commissioned a new kind of warship, one that could keep pace with the fastest carriers, yet still deliver the thunder of a full battle line. The Bureau of Ships called for a vessel able to steam at 33 knots, a speed that matched the operational tempo of carrier task forces and left older battleships trailing far behind. This demand for speed was not a matter of prestige, it was a direct response to the changing face of naval warfare. Aircraft carriers had become the centerpiece of fleet strategy, and any escort that lagged behind risked irrelevance or destruction. The Iowa-class hull stretched over 860 feet, with a beam of 108 feet and a standard displacement of 45,000 tons. Every inch of the design was shaped by the need to combine heavy armor and firepower with the hydrodynamic efficiency required for high-speed operations. 8 Babcock and Wilcox boilers fed 4 General Electric turbines, delivering over 212,000 shaft horsepower to 4 massive screws. On trials, USS Iowa reached 33.2 knots, a figure that would have been unthinkable for any previous battleship. This speed was not just a technical achievement, it was a strategic necessity. Carrier groups operated at 30 knots or more, launching and recovering aircraft while maneuvering to avoid enemy submarines and air attack. The Iowa class could keep up, protect the carriers from surface threats, and provide gunfire support when needed. The Navy's planners insisted on a ship that could serve as both shield and sword, ready to move with the fleet or strike out independently. Commissioned on February 22, 1943, USS Iowa became the prototype for a class of ships that embodied the industrial and military might of the United States at its wartime peak. The decision to build a 45,000-ton, 33-knot battleship was not about chasing records. It was about ensuring that the fleet's most powerful guns could always be where the fight was fiercest. The result was a warship that looked like a fortress, but moved like a predator. A blend of brute strength and speed that would define the last era of American battleships. 9 guns, each with a barrel 50 calibers long, formed the heart of the Iowa-class battleship's main battery. These Mark 7 rifles, arranged in 3 triple turrets, were designed to hurl a 2,700-pound armor-piercing shell farther and faster than any previous American naval gun. At full charge, the shell left the muzzle at 2,500 feet per second, nearly twice the speed of sound. With the guns elevated to 45 degrees, that projectile could strike a target 23 miles away, well beyond the horizon and out of reach for most coastal defenses of the era. A single broadside from all 9 guns delivered over 24,000 pounds of steel and explosives in one coordinated blast. Each turret could cycle through its loading and firing sequence in less than 30 seconds. That allowed a sustained rate of fire that, in theory, could put 480 rounds, the ship's total 16-inch ammunition capacity, on target before resupply. The shells themselves, whether armor-piercing or high-capacity for shore bombardment, were stored deep within armored magazines. Mechanical hoists and a network of handling rooms moved each shell and powder bag through a maze of steel, with gunnery crews working in shifts to keep the guns ready at all hours. The scale of this firepower defied easy comparison. The broadside weight alone matched the payload of a small bomber formation, but with the precision and immediacy only a battleship could provide. Yet every shot depended on hundreds of trained hands, loaders, hoist operators, fire control technicians, each performing a task that was physically demanding and at times hazardous. The spectacle of the guns in action was matched only by the complexity and risk required to make them fire, a reality that would come to define the battleship's legacy as much as its raw destructive power. By the late 1970s, the Iowa-class battleships seemed destined for retirement. Missiles, jets, and submarines now defined naval power, and the big guns sat silent in reserve. Yet within the Navy, doubts lingered. The world was changing, threats were multiplying, and the Reagan administration's call for a fleet of 600 ships brought old options back into focus. Reactivating an Iowa-class ship cost around $200 million, far less than building a new capital ship. Critics questioned the logic, but Navy leaders pointed to combat records that could not be ignored. USS New Jersey stood as the strongest case. In Korea, she fired more than 1,200 16-inch shells, smashing enemy artillery and cutting off supply lines. In Vietnam, she returned to action, firing nearly 850 rounds at North Vietnamese positions. These were not ceremonial displays, they were decisive strikes, reaching targets more than 20 miles inland beyond the range of most aircraft and missiles of the era. Congressional hearings in the 1970s and the 1980s often cited New Jersey's record as proof that battleship firepower still mattered in limited wars. The decision to recommission the Iowa class rested on this legacy of proven force and the need for visible presence at sea. By the 1980s, Iowa-class battleships emerged from mothballs as something new. Hybrids blending World War II armor with Cold War electronics and missiles. Modernization brought Tomahawk land attack missiles in vertical launch cells, letting them hit targets more than 1,000 miles inland. Harpoon launchers gave them anti-ship punch, while the phalanx system stood guard against incoming missiles and aircraft. The original 9 16-inch guns remained, now paired with digital fire control and radar for sharper accuracy. In 1991, this fusion faced its ultimate test. USS Missouri and USS Wisconsin sailed into the Persian Gulf for Operation Desert Storm. On February 2nd, USS Missouri opened fire with 4 16-inch shells, targeting Iraqi artillery near the coast. Over the campaign, Missouri and Wisconsin hammered bunkers, bridges, and command posts, each strike called in by troops ashore. Missouri alone fired more than 100 shells in the opening days. Wisconsin joined, coordinating with Marines to suppress enemy batteries. By the end, both ships had fired 431 16-inch shells and launched Tomahawk missiles at critical targets. Their salvos were more than spectacle. They broke enemy lines and protected coalition forces, proving these old hulls still had a place in modern war. Every shot from an Iowa-class battleship demanded a human effort on a scale few warships could match. In wartime, a single ship carried a crew of 2,700, enough to fill a small town. Nearly 750 of those sailors were tied directly to the main batteries, loaders, powder men, turret officers, hoist operators, and fire control technicians, each trained for a job that left little room for error. Inside the armored turrets, teams worked in shifts to keep the guns ready day and night, moving 2,000-pound shells and 50-pound powder bags through a labyrinth of hoists and loading trays. Powder men, often the youngest and newest aboard, faced the heat and noise of the magazines, handling volatile charges under constant pressure to maintain the ship's firing rhythm. The logistics behind every broadside stretched far beyond the deck. Each 16-inch shell was delivered by specialized ammunition ships, transferred at sea by crane or conveyor and lowered deep into the magazines. A single resupply could involve hundreds of shells and powder bags, with transfer teams racing the clock to keep the guns fed during sustained operations. The strain was not only physical, but organizational. Keeping the main battery in action required coordination between gunnery, engineering, and logistics crews, all working in concert to sustain the battleship's promise of overwhelming firepower. Yet with every shell loaded and fired, the risks mounted, a reality that would soon become impossible to ignore. On April 19, 1989, a blast tore through Turret 2 aboard USS Iowa. 47 sailors died in seconds, the deadliest accident in the ship's post-war service. The investigation traced the cause to the unstable powder bags and a mis-sequenced loading procedure, failures that revealed just how unforgiving the machinery and munitions of a battleship could be. The Navy's accident board found not only technical flaws, but also gaps in training and maintenance, the result of trying to keep a World War II system running in a modern fleet. The loss sent shockwaves through Navy leadership. Congressional hearings followed, and the cost of keeping these ships, thousands of crew, specialized logistics, and constant repairs became impossible to ignore. At the same time, naval doctrine was shifting. Carrier air wings and guided missiles could hit targets farther, faster, and with less risk to crew. Submarines and destroyers took on roles once reserved for battleships. By 1992, the last of the Iowa-class ships left active service. Instead of being scrapped, they were preserved as museum pieces, a tribute to their power and a reminder of the human price paid to unleash it. The era of the battleship ended, not because the guns had grown weak, but because the world had moved on. Today, those guns sit silent, monuments to an era when brute force shaped sea power. Their firepower still awes, but their cost, risk, and complexity outpaced their utility. The lesson endures. Might alone doesn't define relevance. Technology and the world moved on. What would you keep if everything changed?